Hello, everybody. Welcome to the LIUniverse. I'm your host, Dr. Charles Liu, but please, if you have any inclination at all, call me Chuck. Today, we are very, very lucky to have two amazing guests on this show. And, well, why two? And why these two? Well, we often hear of the music of the spheres, but not so much the poetry of the stars. And of course, since astronomy is the poetic science, I figured it'd be a really nice opportunity, considering a particular book just came out recently, talking about the poetry of outer space. So let's go right to it. Let's begin by introducing our co host, Allen Liu. Hey, Alan.
Hello.
What's going on these days? Anything poetic going on your side of things?
Oof, I don't know about poetic exactly. I mean, I have a new microphone for this episode, so we'll see how
Ooh.
that goes. That's more
Ah.
like a about hearing the poetry rather than making
Okay,
it.
so later you're going to recite poem into a brand new microphone. That would be super cool.
That's the hope.
Okay, I can't wait. Now, let us introduce our two guests. Our first guest, Dr. Yun Wang. Hello, Yun.
I
It's so good to have you here. Thank you so much. Now, you intersect in both astronomy and poetry. Tell us how, please.
well, you can say I was born into poetry. Since when I was baby, when I cried, my dad would carry me off into dark corridor and recite poetry to me. Then I would stop crying.
Wow.
That's
How
nice.
did I get into astronomy? Well, I grew up in a really dark area, right? Kind of rural, right? So you could actually see the night sky, so glorious. You could see the Milky Way.
It's
So since
lovely.
I was a little kid, I always wondered, what are they? What's out there, right? So my ambition when I was a little kid was always, to grow up and go as far away as I can from home and explore the universe. So that's precisely what I'm doing now. So I'm living my dream. So happy.
Oh, fantastic. And so you're now in Pasadena, California, doing that stuff with awesome science, cosmological research, which we'll talk about in a short time. Our second guest is Midge Goldberg. Hello, Midge.
Hello.
I'm excited because you have such an interesting background as well. And it's not exactly astronomy related, but through the poetry, you have come to the universe and knocked at its literary doorstep. Please tell us how you got into this world of astronomy and space and poetry and all that.
Well, I too, as a little kid, always loved looking up at the stars and had my books about you'll go to the moon. Grew up
Mhm.
in Florida, where we stood outside of our high school and watched the very first space shuttle take off across saw it streaking across the sky, and
Wow.
just kind of always was interested in stars and space and all of that. I came to poetry older, and I write a lot of my own poetry. But then when I had this opportunity, I just thought this was just the perfect combination to be able to look for poems about outer space. Just they seem to be, um, kind of looking for the same things, astronomers and poets looking for answers. So I loved how they went together.
So true. Oh, you said it so well. And I know that a lot of times, astronomers or scientists in general kind of like look at poetry and go, hmm. But at the same time, I know that there are often poets that look at astronomy and go, hmm. So somehow, today, in these moments that we have together, I hope that we can bridge that gap into, ah, that'll be fun. All right. So let us start as we often do. Let us start as we so often do with today's joyfully cool cosmic thing. And Alan, this has to
Ooh,
do with a possible candidate relativistic tidal disruption event. Have I
well,
thrown
that's
too many
fun.
words together?
As
Anyway,
long as you explain them, it'll be fine.
okay. A recent study has shown that there's been a flare of radio emission from a distant galaxy, maybe 800, 900 million light years away from Earth. And it's just been getting brighter and brighter and brighter for years. People are like, what the heck? What was it based on? Why is there something happening like that? Well, careful observation showed that the location of this flare happens to be right near a supermassive black hole system in this galaxy. And so that's like remarkable. And now a hypothesis has been formed where the reason this flare is happening is because a supermassive black hole at the center of this galaxy, which is causing this sort of active galactic nucleus activity, is also ripping a star apart as we watch. Over the course of years, this star is being torn to shreds and being eaten by the black hole, and in the process, that releases huge amounts of radio energy. I'm incredibly psyched about this because I love seeing this sort of thing happen hundreds of millions of light years away where we don't have to worry about things like that. I just who here doesn't like black holes? Midge, do you dislike black holes?
I think black holes are great, mainly because it's a metaphor, and there's your first connection to poetry. All these terms that you're using are metaphors, right? I mean, it's not really a hole, is it?
On the other hand, actually, it is kind of black and it is kind of a hole. But that's literal too. Oh, this is good.
It's sort of both, I think.
Yeah. What do you think, Alan? You're black.
Well, I mean, like,
relationship.
So I'm thinking about black holes, right? Like, the idea is that they're kind of black, but they're kind of also emitting all this light from the accretion disks and everything. So they're kind of not that. But like, I'm just thinking about the history of it, because before there was the idea of black holes, there was the idea of dark stars, which were like the sort of conceptual predecessors to what we now know as black holes. And I'm sure people could explain that even better than I could.
Oh no,
but like,
not at all.
But now it's like they're not, like, they're often described as holes, but they're also like these really puzzling and exciting objects that are like out there pulling everything in towards them, and it's really impressive.
That's very cool. Now, you have, of course, your own cosmological, general relativistic perspective on black holes, as opposed to my sort of more phenomenological object of black holes having no hair and just watching stuff drop in. So tell us
that one's a metaphor.
That's true. So tell us a little bit about your take. I mean, black holes and something like this, a tidal disruption event where you're actually eating a star and we're watching the results.
My take is very similar to yours, actually. So I guess the way I think about black holes is kind of boring, right? I just think of them as where gravity is extremely strong. Well, in cosmology, we mainly explore the largest scales where gravity is very weak. So, yeah, but I do think black holes are pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by black holes ripping stars apart as a poet.
Yeah.
Which is a very cool thing,
I already wrote down the phrase torn to shreds, because how is that not a poem?
There you go.
Well, I can't argue with that. That's wonderful. But yeah, your science is indeed, Ewan, much more than just one object at a time. You're looking at literally millions or even billions, if possible, of objects scattered across the universe to try to make sense of patterns of things happening to space and time itself, right? Give us a little sense of exactly what you're trying to do.
Not much at all. I just want the 3D locations of tens of millions of galaxies. So I have a 3D map of the universe.
Nothing at all, just imagine the whole universe.
I can use that to answer questions such as, what is the universe made of? What is the ultimate fate of the universe? Will it expand forever? Will it actually collapse? So that's dark energy, of course. So yeah, really fun. And eventually someday, perhaps I can get 500 million or 1 billion galaxies in 3D.
Oh,
that's my ultimate dream.
1 billion galaxies. That's just
in 3D.
In 3D. Wow. Okay. So we would be able to observe these really this entire data set only through like a headset with a 3D virtual reality. Really, that's remarkable.
Or those goggles, those little red green glasses. If you don't have the
Oh yeah,
headset,
we can be in a theater and watch those kinds of things happen. But the thing which interests me in what you just said, Yoon, is that we seem already to have the answers basically to some of the questions, or at least to some extent, right? We already know that the universe is expanding, and based on what we know, we think the universe will expand forever because of this dark energy or cosmological constant that's in there. So are you sort of picking around the edges and trying to detail exactly how long it'll take, or is there actually still fundamental questions about the fate of the universe that are not well understood yet?
It's the latter.
Oh,
Okay, so we know the universe is expanding today, has been expanding since its birth. We do not know, I disagree with what you said.
ah,
We do not know that the universe will expand forever. That's a huge assumption.
really?
Okay, we do not know. So I think you said that because some people may go around saying, "Oh, we already know the answer. Why spend more money on these expensive satellites or whatever? We know dark energy is a cosmological constant." Of course, if dark energy were a cosmological constant, the universe will expand forever. But we do not know that dark energy is in fact the cosmological constant.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, we could go on forever and ever, and I have all kinds of questions. We're going to have to get back to the science in a moment. For example, I really want to touch on this point about gravity being weak on such large scales compared to the quantum and all that, and the unification, what makes it so hard. But we got to put that aside for just a moment because I got to get to this book of poems. Midge, you've been listening so patiently to all of us as we're talking about the scientific
yeah.
stuff. But tell me, how did you and Yun connect, and how did Yun wind up as one of the poets featured in this book?
The name of the book is Outer Space 100 Poems. This is a picture of it. And it is
Cool.
Oh, that's a
published
nice picture.
Oh
by
yes, for those of you who are just listening to this, that the book looks very pretty. I would put it on my coffee table.
It's got a Milky Way on it. There,
it,
it's
it
very
does.
cool.
It is
Yeah.
it's published by Cambridge University Press. The cover cover photo is actually from Stowe, Vermont, not too far from here. So I liked that.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
another place where there's dark sky. Oh,
Yep.
wonderful.
Mhm.
And how Yoon and I got connected. So I did a lot of things researching what poems to include. And one of the phases of my research was doing a lot of searching on the internet, combining every possible word I could think of that had to do with astronomy with the word poem. And I can't be sure exactly which combination, but it was probably either galaxy or Andromeda um, that brought me to Ewan's poem. And
Wow.
so I
Wow.
looked her up and I sent her an email. Would you be interested in being included in this book? And she wrote right back and said she would. And that was very exciting. And then I got the bonus, which is that when I looked up her um, other publication credits, I saw that she also translated poetry. And I said, I would
Oh,
love to include this a Du Fu poem in the book. Would you
yes.
possibly be able to translate it? And Ewan said, "Well, I'm working on a proposal for a mission to space, so I don't have enough time." And I said, "Okay, okay, that's more important." And then about 3 hours later, she sent me her first version of the translation.
You finished the
I
proposal in
could not
three
resist.
hours? Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Fantastic!
No.
I loved it. So I'm
Oh wow.
so glad that I found her.
Oh, that's just great. Dufu, for those of you in the audience who don't know, is usually considered one of the two greatest poets of the Tang Dynasty in China. The other being Li Bo or Li Bai, depending on how you pronounce his name.
李白，
Yeah,
李白杜甫，
right. These two are just side by side. They're what, the yin and the yang of Chinese Tang Dynasty poetry, and so I myself know exactly one poem in Chinese that I can recite, and it is one that every school child in Taiwan
嗯
in the seventh grade must learn and memorize. Fortunately, it's only 20 syllables long. So it's only a little bit longer than a haiku, so it's easier. But it's Li Bai, and it's called Ye Shi, or Night Thoughts. And it's a beautiful little poem, but it's really short. So I'm just gonna say it in Chinese, and then I actually translated it for fun, for no apparent reason, into iambic tetrameter, which is what Robert Frost used in a lot of his poems. So it sounds like this: 床前明月光，疑是地上霜。举头望明月，低头思故乡。That's it. Isn't that cool? So, if you're a
Mhm.
7th grader in Taiwan, start practicing. You'll get this done. You'll win prizes for reading that.
At least in the 70s.
So, I was very, very lucky. Yes, there's a visual poet named Monica Ong Reed who took this and did some additional art on this. So it was very nice. And see if I can remember what I wrote on this tetrameter. It was before my bed, the moonlight falls. It looks to me like frost on loam. I raise my head, the moon shines bright. Then I look down and think of home. Same idea, right? Short.
Mhm.
This is 32
Yeah.
syllables instead of 20 syllables, but it's all in a strict form, and it's just these kinds of ideas. Midge, tell me about these poems. Tell me about what you've chosen.
Well, yeah, it was great. I mean, I started, of course, with poems, somewhat newer poems that really about like landing on the moon or the Hubble telescope or astronauts. And so I started to work on the concept of the book, and I decided I wanted it to stretch out further. I wanted it to reach back further. Even though I was looking at poems that were hundreds or even thousands of years old, I could see some of the same themes repeating as ones that were written now. And I
Ah,
just loved following those connections all the way through there. And also the way people write about outer space. Sometimes they're telling a story about outer space and using poetry to tell the story in a better way. Other times they're using stuff in outer space as a metaphor for something very personal, like love or loss. And so I liked following those themes too. So it was just so much fun to just stumble on a poem from ancient Egypt, or stumble on a poem from somebody in Australia, or another one from a Native American poem from not very far from here, from the Algonquin tribe. And
wow.
so it was just I just had so much fun finding all these poems, and of course the challenge was limiting it to only 100. The series, Cambridge has a
Fair.
series of books called 100 poems, and usually
Wow.
they're about poets or poetic schools. But I got them to agree to do this on outer space, and then I realized, oh, I can only pick 100. So
Alas. No, that's super cool though. But Yoon, yeah, comment on this, please, on this for a moment.
Well, I was thrilled to be included in this amazing anthology that Mitch put together after a lot of labor of love. Incredible amount of work, I'm sure. So I think it's just astounding, to have poetry about space or relating to space, at least some one way or another, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Over millennia.
Yeah, it
So
is.
that's just
Yeah.
okay. So thank you so much, Mitch, for including me. So I'm honored.
Ewan taught me something too about it. So I loved her poem, and it's about I think she's going to read it later, about going out into the galaxy and Andromeda galaxy. But she also goes back home and she's talking about a garden. And then when she was translating the Du Fu, she was telling me that he's talking about a garden too, his own garden. And I
Wow.
realized that there was, I mean, I don't know if it was on exactly on purpose, but they both have this theme of both outer space and home. And then I started to see that theme go out throughout the book. Other poets who talk about bringing home with them when they go out into space. And it was
In
just,
the garden.
yeah, in the garden.
I'm blown. My mind is being blown more and more because for all of you out there in the audience who are like, poetry? Hmm. I think we're starting to go, now, just a little tiny bit. Let's take a question. Alan, is there a student question that we can bring to Midge and Yun and sort of have them talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, so the first question we're going to bring out here is from William, who is asking, how can poetry be used to communicate astronomy research?
Ooh. Yun, I think both you and Midge, Yun being, a researcher. Midge, you go first. How?
Mhm.
How?
Well, there is a poem in this book called Olber's Paradox, which tries to
Ah.
explain Olber's paradox. And coincidentally, the first person, I believe, who gave a reasonable explanation of Olber's paradox was Edgar Allan Poe, who was a poet.
Yeah, I remember reading that somewhere. That was cool.
So I think that poetry gives people. I mentioned metaphor before. I think poetry can give people a nice metaphor to hang on to when they're trying to understand a somewhat more abstract concept. And now I'll let you
Wow.
take over because she's really the one.
What is Olber's paradox? Now that you've read the poem Olber's paradox, do you understand Olber's paradox?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Olber's paradox is the question of why, if the night sky is full of stars, is it not always light out?
Yes,
Mhm.
you did it. It worked.
It's a very
Poetry
good
did
poem.
communicate astronomy research. Yay! I mean, it's not
Yeah,
that like you are completely ignorant about science. So I don't want to give people that impression at all, because you are a very accomplished technical individual as well, which we will try to get into in a few minutes. But
But I
that's
did
cool that it
learn
happened.
that from this poem, so
You did learn that from this poem.
yes, I did.
Yes,
that's awesome.
that's great. Okay, that's going in my astronomy classes this fall. Absolutely. Okay, Yun, your same question to you. How can poetry communicate astronomy research?
Well, since I'm both an astronomer and a poet, I don't actually do it intentionally. So, but people have always told me, "Oh, I love the astronomy poems in your book. Oh, I love the science poems." And I said, "Really? Which ones?" So I don't even think about it.
You yourself, just in your poetry, you are communicating astronomy research. But for you, it's kind of like not intentional. You just do
Right.
it
It's
because it comes out
organic
of you.
because, yeah, it's part of me, right? It's how I think. So I am looking at the world through a poet's eye, but I'm also a trained astronomer.
Yeah.
And then when I write poetry, now and then, it it's there.
Wow. I like
It's
that.
fun for
That
both
That's great.
sides,
No,
I
that's
hope.
great. And you are a living, breathing example of how you should not think of a human being as only left-brained or only right-brained, which is such a common claim of people out in the world. In fact, we are all both-brained, right? That's what we are. And
Exactly.
and
Why limit yourself?
yeah, that's great. And uh, let's let's hear the poem now. Go for it, Yun. Let's hear it.
Space Journal, Serendipity. En route to Andromeda, I launch luminous spheres into the black desert of space to measure the expansion of the universe. Back to the garden, the air sparkles. Hildegard Barons singing Brunhilda's dilemma. Resists the urge to touch rainbow fish in a lily pond. Climb the aspen tree. Its eyes latch onto my toes. Light takes 2 million years to reach Andromeda. The universe is almost empty. A cat's reflection gazes back at me from the dome's translucent dark vault.
Whoa! Whoa! Oh
Now,
man!
someone can make a movie based on this poem, so I claim.
Oh,
Okay, so
completely.
I provide, right, the main idea here. So also the garden, right? So
Yeah.
Midge read it as actual garden, right?
Mhm.
Kind of flashback of home. But here I actually meant like an actual garden on a spaceship,
Yeah.
okay, or holodeck, but actually an actual garden, except it's the kind of futuristic garden, right? That take very little space and have
Yes.
magical things. So the aspen trees are actually, able to make sure I don't fall from the tree when I climb it.
Amazing. That's
Yeah,
super
and so
cool.
the science, yeah, so the science, right? So we measure the expansion of the universe using standard candles. That's how we know the
Right.
expansion of the universe is speeding up and it's accelerating.
Right.
And the standard candles we use is called a type 1A supernova. It's
Mm.
just like it's the explosive death of white dwarfs, which weigh exactly 1.4 times the mass of the sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, they reach that limit and they just explode in runaway nuclear reaction. It's pretty dramatic, so dramatic. They light up the universe,
Yes.
literally. Right? You can see them, across the universe. And so here I'm saying that in the future, right? Can you imagine someone? Can you imagine me in a future incarnation?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Not that I believe in that sort of thing. Okay, metaphorically speaking. So I imagine that I'll be on a spaceship and doing experiment to measure the expansion of the universe then, because
Wow.
the expansion of the universe changes, right? So we need
Mm.
standard candles. That's why I have the spheres. I will have identical spheres
Yes.
which will have the same luminosity, extremely bright. So then, of course, en route to Andromeda, so it's right. So I imagine we will not get to Andromeda for a very long time. So
Yes.
Fair.
probably in keeping with the capability of doing an experiment to measure expansion rate of the universe from
Yes.
spaceship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There's so
Then,
much there.
oh, yes. Finally, it's a bit of quirky fantasy at the end.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So why am I seeing Cat's reflection gazing back at me?
Yeah.
Well, because I can morph into cat. That's what I told you. Someone
That's
can make a whole
wonderful.
movie based on this poem.
Oh,
Well, I had
wow.
so much fun writing this
Sounds
poem.
fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so marvelous. And when I heard you say garden, I first thought Garden of Eden. You were thinking about the
Could be
original
that too.
beauty.
Why not?
Uh-huh. Your vision of the holodeck was exactly what I was thinking of. A Star Trek, holodeck
Hmm.
first introduced in the debut of this Next Generation series. And I also thought of at the end there, you're talking about the cat for a moment there. I thought you were talking about Schrodinger, and you were thinking
Could be
about
that too.
parallel, many worlds interpretation of
Mhm.
quantum mechanics, where you could be a cat because every single
Mhm.
possibility exists. Uh,
That's a new take on Schrodinger's cat.
why
Not
not?
not
Right?
only is it the cat, you're not sure if it's alive or dead, and you can't be sure, but also you could be the cat
Yeah.
yourself.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So I love cats, right? So if I can be a shapeshifter, I would change myself into a cat. At
So
least for a few days, until I get tired of it. My theory about that is most poets are cat people.
Yeah.
ah,
Mm, fair.
really interesting.
Maybe
Wow.
cats are more cosmic than dogs. I don't
Oh,
know.
Well,
dogs are more
I think
earthly.
that
Yeah.
cats. Well, remember, cats used to be worshipped as gods in ancient Egypt, right? Because they're
Mhm.
very dignified, they're aloof, they're
Right.
so perfectly beautiful.
That's
they
true.
could they could be gods if we didn't know better.
Maybe like the
Amazing.
planets and such, right? They're also
Yeah,
aloof.
that's true. Oh, this is how poetry relates to astronomy. We just start talking randomly, and that's how it goes, right? Hey, is Chuck Liu here? Thanks for hanging with us for part one of our time with Yun Wang and Midge Goldberg and co host Allen Liu. We talked about so much great stuff that we just had to split this up into two parts. So stay tuned for part two of this episode, where we'll continue with the poetry that explores the wonders of the universe as well as the science behind it. If you like what you see and hear, please join us on Patreon. And as always, thank you for being a part of the LIUniverse.